Hi everyone, it's Wednesday Warriors and it's me, Arielle, and this week I'm going to be talking about coping with losing part of your support team. We're going to be doing a 4-week rotation about eating disorders and crises, and we'll be looking at crises like coping with losing part of your support team, as I am today, also eating disorders and natural disasters, death of a family member or friend, things that are on a very large scale. We'll also be looking at dealing with moving to a new place or a new school, and hopefully a little bit about trauma and PTSD and things that might occur after particular crises. So in looking at losing part of your support team, this could mean many things. It could mean your main therapist, it could mean a psychiatrist, it could mean your nutritionist, it could even mean your medical doctor. It could be a mental health nurse, it could be one of your parents, it could just be some supportive piece that was cohesive in your life with the rest of a team that is now gone, or there's something lacking there. I've known a number of people who have lost a therapist in the sense that their therapist told them it was time for them to move on and stop seeing them, or the therapist themselves moved and was no longer seeing patients because they retired, or they were no longer seeing patients because they moved to a new location. The reason really isn't important, it's still a loss for the individual. And I think that's really the lens through which you have to look at it, because if you are talking about losing someone as a piece of your regular support team, it's a loss like any other, and in a sense, you're grieving it. I know that a lot of other people can talk about losing a member of a support team in a way that speaks to their own personal experiences. So I'm doing my video from a slightly different perspective, in that I never lost a member of my treatment team back when I was struggling. I was seeing a therapist at one time who was an eating disorder specialist, and she retired from the profession. But she was retiring at a point when I had been seeing her for almost 6 years already, and we were both really in the same headspace and really knew that it was time that we both moved on. So it wasn't a sense of loss for me. It was sort of a celebration in a way that finally we were on the same page. And at that point I had already tapered off the therapy, so much so that I had been seeing her every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, and then every 3 months, just to sort of check in and say, this is what I'm doing, isn't it great? And I was really so much closer to recovered than I was in the recovering aspect, and fully in the sense of the word. So when the opportunity presented itself to me to move on, it was like, yeah, okay, I can move on. I'm ready. And I didn't experience that sense of loss, but I have experienced loss in many other ways, and it's hard. Loss is hard. So since I feel that I've learned a lot about loss, I want to take that slant, and I'll let others tell you about their personal experiences with losing a member of a support team, and I'll talk about it in the way that we can all relate to loss, and that you can understand that it's perfectly okay to feel very sad and very upset when someone does leave you. Right now I'm doing hospice social work, so I have done a lot of research and read a lot of things about grief and about loss and about bereavement. And trust me when I say that loss and grief and bereavement do not only relate to the dying, and they don't only relate to loss. Can mean a divorce or a relationship breaking up, a friendship breaking up. It can be loss of health, losing a job. It can be losing a significant amount of money, having a miscarriage, dealing with infertility, the death of a pet, the death of something that you really cherished in the form of a dream or a goal. It can be coping with an illness that hasn't killed you but has still left you with a sense of loss. And among all of these things, there's also the loss of a support system, or the loss of a member of your support team. Some people do really well when their therapist tells them to move on, or their therapist has to move on for some reason. Sometimes it's a really good push in a right direction. Sometimes it's met with a lot of positive feedback on both sides. Sometimes the individual is ready for it, and then it doesn't feel like a loss. But when it is a loss, and you're grieving that loss, you have to understand that going through the process of grieving it is perfectly natural and okay, and you're allowed to do it. And I think talking about losing part of your support team in the scope of a loss is the healthiest, because I feel that people can accept that more, and they can say, I'm grieving something right now. I've had a loss. I can move on from this, but it may take me a while. And I have every right to go through the process and through all of those steps. And sometimes you go through the stages of loss as we know them, things like denial, things like anger. Maybe you're going to feel very angry for a long time, or even a shorter period of time before you can get to a place of accepting it. Maybe you're going to deny that it's really happening and keep seeing your therapist after they've told you they're going to be moving in 3 months. And you just go and you don't talk about the fact that they're going to be moving. You just keep going every appointment and talking about the things you've been working on and pretend that it's not happening. There are lots of different ways that people cope, and not all of them are good, but many of them are very normal, and many of them are part of the process. And that's what I'm really trying to stress to you, because I don't like when people feel that they are doing something wrong, or they're feeling the wrong way, or they don't have a right to feel the way they feel, or something's wrong with them because they feel the way they feel, or that they should just suck it up and get over it and move on, because moving on is a process. Moving on is not something that happens in 3 seconds. Now, ideally, when you have a support team and one piece of that support team leaves or is gone in some way, you still have the rest of the team to fall back on. So if the person who is giving you that sense of loss is not the only support you have, this is really the time to rely on the other people that can support you and that do support you. And if the person who is leaving in some aspect is really part of a cohesive team, the job of the team is to sort of surround you and buoy you up and be in communication with the person who is leaving so that they know the right things to talk about and they know the right things you need at those moments, because everyone will need different things and everyone will need different lengths of time to go through different stages of the loss. And obviously when you're dealing with a loss, you're still dealing with all of the stuff that had you go see a therapist or a nutritionist or a mental health nurse or whoever it is in the first place. So it's not the only thing you're struggling with. You were already struggling with something, and now you have something else to heap onto the plate, which is the loss. When you're experiencing loss, you're experiencing emotional suffering, and that's why it hurts so badly, because you're already experiencing emotional suffering when you're recovering from an eating disorder. So when you throw the loss into there, you get all tangled up, and it is a very tumultuous time for many. There is no normal time period for grieving. Everyone grieves differently, and that's perfectly fine. And there isn't a rule that says if you have grieved something for 1 month, now it's time to move on. Or if you have grieved something for 3 months, now it's time to move on. Many people think that way, especially when they haven't experienced a significant loss, but it's simply not true. Sometimes grief can take a very long time to run its course. So the first thing that you really need to do is tell yourself it's okay to feel this way. A lot of the time, fear goes along with a sense of loss. So once you lose someone or something, especially if it's a member of your support team and you're struggling with something else, you might be afraid of what's going to happen now in this person's absence. You might be afraid where you go from here. You might be afraid of what you're capable of or not capable of. You might be afraid of what is in store for you, what every day holds. And there's a lot of fears that people can come up with, and the fear not only holds them back, but it sort of accentuates the grief, it enhances it, and it makes the loss feel more powerful. And that loss then feels like this big dark cloud that's looming over you, or this big deep dark hole that you're ready to fall into. And you just have to be careful, and I think sometimes almost envisioning the loss that way kind of helps, because you know you don't want to be engulfed by a big dark cloud, and you know you don't want to be engulfed by a big dark hole. So you'll sort of watch your step and allow yourself the grieving process, but you won't get lost in the loss. And as we go through our 4-week rotation, I will talk about loss again, because it relates to so many different forms of crisis. And especially with crisis and grief, that fear is very evident, especially with things like natural disasters, things like, moving to a new school, stuff that is going to be very big and significant in your life, that the fear is really at the forefront of your mind. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.